Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I devote my time to ranting and raving about board games, but usually more the latter part. If any of the games on this list have taken your fancy, then perhaps you might want to pay attention to this sponsor, because you might be able to bag a bargain.
As gamers, we find it hard to deal with empty shelves, some worse than others. You therefore want a supplier that has what you need at affordable prices and delivers on time. For me, that supplier is KIENDA. They offer a discount on bulk purchases as well as a point scheme for future acquisitions down the line. If there's a hot title you're after, chances are KIENDA's got it. Wingspan? Mine. Arc Nova? Mine. Eclipse? Actually I hate that game, it's terrible, but you might like it. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So we're continuing with the top 50. This is the 40 through to 31. We got some movers and shakers on this section for sure. But all of these games I really like, whether they've fallen or risen. It's just usually just taste change, times change. The time you actually have available to play these games changes. It's all these things that, all these factors that go into this list and the games that I enjoy at any particular time. So, thinking about what I thought about games last year could be vastly different to this year. It's just the way things are. So without further ado, let's just crack on with it.
Ludicrous speed!
Number 40, down 7 places. Not a big leap for sure. This is a 2-player only game, although technically you can play it solo and multiplayer if you get the right expansions for it. But this is one of the core deck builders that exists out there. We're talking like one of the cleanest designs that there is. Yes, you can expand it to include more elements, but second to probably the original like Dominion, which is not the choice here, Star Realms on the other hand is still a really clean, really solid deck builder. I like playing it on the app. I played it quite a lot on the cruise on the app, to be honest, when it was like evening time, or when it was, I got like half an hour to kill, I just need some me time, I can just whip on the Star Realms app and play a few games. Granted, I wish they toned down the difficulty on some of those scenarios, but still it allows me to play some cool 2-player, effectively, deck builder games. And Star Realms, besides looking gorgeous with the art, I was never a massive fan of the way Hero Realms was in comparison to Star Realms. I always preferred the spacey look, but it's just super clean. You've got your 5 cards, you play all the cards, you do all the effects, and you buy more ships from 4 different factions, and try to fight the other opponent until they drop all their 50 life points. It's pretty straightforward affair, but because it's super clean, super fast, and just, still super fun, it's one that I really enjoy. Add the expansions, particularly like the first couple of main box sets, and you get to play it solo or multiplayer co-op. So you can go up against this big bad that has some cool rules that tweak the nature of the game, and all of you as a team or solo try to beat it while doing the whole core deck building thing. I wouldn't say no to a few more of those scenarios. I'm not sure there's kind of enough of them, but what I've got is still pretty solid. This is just a nice clean design that I can either have a big box full of stuff like I have downstairs, or you can just have the tiny little boxes for that only hold one set for 2 players, and you can just take it with you as a nice portable game. It just does the job really nicely.
Spaceship!
Okay, you want shakers? Whoa, this one has risen quite considerably. I'm kind of shocked by how much it's gone up. This has gone up by, I kid you not, 50 places. 50. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how it's jumped that high, but maybe it's the recent games I've played of it. Maybe I've played it with the advanced modes more rather than the basic modes, or maybe it's just a game that's taken a bit more time to evolve for me. This is a racing game, probably one of the purest racing games that exists at the moment. Very simple, can be played with up to, like 7 or 8 players now with the expansions. We got another one coming out literally later this month, Tunnel Vision I think it's called. But if that's not a giveaway, then this is Heat Pedal to the Metal. Now, Downforce, another game that I really like as a racing game, isn't even on my, I don't think it's even on my top 100, or if it is, it's certainly a lot further down. Where's Downforce? Come on, I gotta see. Downforce has gotta be around here somewhere. It'll be annoying if it's higher. No, it's not. Where's Downforce? Downforce. No, it's not even on my top 100 anymore. Okay, but it must be in like the low hundreds or something. But, that's a racing game I really do enjoy. But Heat Pedal to the Metal, took a little while to really sit with me. Like, I already really liked it. Go check out my review. But, over time, I've enjoyed it more and more. You can play it solo with 5 AI players, and it's an absolute breeze. We've had 1 expansion, which I think is a bit overpriced for what it is, but, more maps and more cards I'm not going to complain about. But when you play this multiplayer with people, it doesn't take a lot to teach this game. It's pretty straightforward, bare-bone deck-building mechanics, but with the choices to make of like, well, how fast do I go? How much do I push my car? I'm going to take too much heat. I need to balance the heat generation over the course of the game. It's only a couple of laps, which means it really doesn't take that long to actually get through the whole game. In fact, at first, I think this might have been a reason I slightly, downplayed it a bit, is because I actually made the rules error. I think you keep looking at the iconography for what each lap is for, and I keep reading the wrong number as laps. So I think I was playing one lap too many in the past. As soon as that got corrected, it's like, oh right, actually this is a bit more of a speedy game. In fact, not the shortest game ever, but it doesn't outstay its welcome if you keep to the typical 2-lap timer. But I've also had more experience playing this with the advanced garage cards. So normally when you play the basic mode, which I've taught it a lot as, you only use the 3 basic cards in your deck alongside all the normal starter cards. But with the garage module, you get to use these advanced cards, like anti-lock brakes or special suspension or nitrous or whatever, all sorts of different little upgrades. And you draft these at the start of the game so that you have 3 unique cards in your deck that nobody else has. That is already a cool phase, because there's a lot of these different unique ones here, and you can create something that's a bit of a kind of like that gel well together. Or maybe you can think, well, you know what, I'm going to take this massive huge speed thing here, but I'm going to need something to cool down with, so something like that. Or maybe you just like having a lot of choice, so you take a bunch of the wheels that let you have multiple numbers on them. It's entirely up to you. You can even just take more heat cards so that your engine's more efficient. Whatever you decide to pick, it really does diversify you from the other players, and I like these cards. Are they fully balanced? I'll probably bet not, but you don't really notice it in a light racing game. It's well produced, nice and smooth, decent amount of maps. I mean, we've got another expansion. I'm sure it'll probably be a little overpriced again, but you know what? I'm going to buy it because I want maps. I like having lots of different tracks to pick from, and more cards isn't going to hurt. Am I ever going to play this with 8 players or 9 players or whatever the hell it's up to now? Probably not. I got a feeling it's going to go up to 8. I think we started with 6, then it would upgraded to 7, and now we're going to get 8 with this one. I'm not sure how keen I am to play this with 8, but, we'll see. Maybe there'll be a time at a convention or so. But I get a kick out of playing this with pretty much anything from solo all the way up to, I usually like to cap it at 5, but it doesn't really matter. You can use AI cards to fill the blanks, or just accept that it's going to be a slightly longer game. It's still great fun no matter what. 38, down 14 places. It just hasn't had many plays in the last few months, but I still take it in the game bag, so I still want to play this whenever I can. It's usually a bit of a hard sell to other people, but I know how good this game is, and a lot of you out there know how good this game is. This is another deck builder, so I do like my deck builders, but when it's a core deck builder, it's a core deck builder, whatever. I like deck builders now to give me a little bit of a twist. Don't just bolt it with a worker placement mechanic. Don't just, do the usual clean deck builder. Give me some weird twist, whether it's theme or mechanics. Fort does exactly that. Fort has this great theme of you as kids trying to build a fort. It's a typical kind of almost like South Park recess type thing. And it suits the artwork style of this publisher particularly well. But the idea is that you use deck building in order to get the different kid cards that have various effects. Some are just private to you, some are global and can be used by other players. So there's a little bit of interaction, which is not something you get in a lot of deck builders. But on top of that, the theme is actually reasonably strong with, some of the aspects of the game. For example, when you use a card in a round, you only use one card and you boost it with other cards, almost like a bit of a trick taker. The ones that you don't use, i.e. the kids you didn't play with, technically, you put them in front of your board, and then other players can recruit them at the end of their turns when you normally get to take new cards. Which makes sense, because if you don't play with the kids, they get all up themselves for a strop and then go to somebody else's fort.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
It's entirely thematic and works. Throw in the dogs and cats mini expansion and it's even better. The dogs, again, if you don't play with the dog, it wanders off because it wants to be loved. The cat comes to you if you meet its criteria, but then if somebody else meets the criteria at a later turn, the cat goes off to them. That's what cats do. They're fickle. So everything in this game works both thematically and mechanically, and for a deck builder to do that is pretty damn impressive. All right, there are very few deck builders out there that I can call call thematic. And if any of you try to say Dune Imperium, shut it.
Damn!
yeah, I really do enjoy this one. A bit long with 4 players, that is a slight problem. I wish you could shorten it somehow with 4 players and AP people stay away. But 2 or 3 players, this one is just really solid. I kind of wish there was a solo mode for it. Maybe there's some unofficial one out there, but I wish they actually put an official solo mode in it so I could have some fun with it. But well, never mind. I still really like playing this because when I play it, when I bring it out, I have to teach people most of the time. They've never seen it before. They suddenly see all the little nuances it has that separates it from the rest, and they go, ooh, and that's the feeling you want. That's the sight you want to see when you teach someone a game. That kind of click moment when they start realizing, ah, yes, I like this. Sold.
Demand suddenly skyrocketed. You all saw it.
37 down 7 places, so still essentially within this, sort of 10 bracket, but close enough. But this is the game where I actually mentioned it on the previous list. We were talking about one particular engine building game that I liked on that one, Veil of Eternity. We mentioned another engine building game called Res Arcana, which I didn't particularly like myself. I found it too boring and just not that interesting. But this is the reason why I didn't really care too much about Res Arcana in the first place when it was even announced, because Res Arcana was almost trying to be a simpler version of Seasons. Seasons, though, is still brilliant. It's still a great game with the best dice ever. Can I see Seasons anywhere? Please, please, please. Is Seasons here? I got a feeling Seasons in the room unless I am completely blind. But, yep. I think it's in a different room. Sorry, no playing with the dice today, but to be fair, that was getting a little bit childish after a while. They've got these big chunky dice that I just can't help but sort of toss around. It is insane. But Seasons is a great engine builder because, you know, you've got 3 rounds of the game, but the timer track can be like interacted with by players. So how fast you go depends on which dice you don't draft in a round. Again, a mechanic I really like, where dice drafting happens and the one that's left over has an effect on the game. Always good. But you draft the cards at the start of the game that you're going to use throughout the 3 different rounds of play. And you're trying to build up a cool engine and get victory points and crystals in, you know, different manner from those cards. So it's got a similarity to Res Arcana, but I think this one is just a more fun game. I mean, for starters, it looks a lot better. It's more interesting. And once you got the expansions, the wealth of cards allow you to do some really cool combo plays. Is it longer than Res Arcana? Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. Res Arcana definitely beats it in terms of its game length because it was meant to be a nice quickie game. But Seasons for me is just far more enjoyable, and it's got big chunky dice. Enough said.
Put the dice away before I take them away.
Lord help me, what? Knock on my door! Knock next time!
So moving on, and we've got another deck builder. I don't know what it is with this section of 10 in deck builders, and we've got another one coming up later. This is just a genre that I really like. I like deck builders, it's a good fun mechanic, but I do prefer the pure deck builders, because when you bolt it with another mechanic, it feels like a side thing. Yes, I mentioned like Great Western Trail on the previous list, and that is a good fun game, but when you combine the mechanics and then just throw deck building in, that deck building sometimes doesn't work from a thematic standpoint, and it can, you know, mess up some of the rest of the game. I mean, Dune Imperium, as I say, is not one of my favorite games ever. I don't mind it, but I think the deck building is probably the weakest element of the game, and yet it's kind of half the game, so you can't sort of get away from it. Pure deck builders work better, and this is Snowdale Designs' first deck builder that put them on the map. Well, I say first, it's their only one, but this is their first game. It just basically made them a household name for this particular style of art, which is Dale of Merchants. The artwork in this game is beautiful and gorgeous. All these different anthropomorphic animals, and you can buy Dale of Merchants in small box sets or get that big collector's box like I've got downstairs, and then everything's already shoved in it. I've got Cosmic Encounter style player powers in it. I've got all these different, like, you know, little pieces for various factions, but the main thing is that it's got loads of factions, everything from owls to crocodiles to squirrels to parrots to pandas to, you know, comedians to, I don't know, I've already mentioned bats, didn't I? I mean, to lemurs. Is lemurs in there? I'm pretty sure. Maybe there's like meerkats. There's all sorts of animals in this game, and each faction behaves very differently. The idea that you've got to it's kind of like a race rather than a victory point game. You've got to get 8 different stalls out in front of you, and you have to be able to play cards in sets with the numbers adding up to the right value in order to do that. But each of the different factions behaves differently. One faction's very good at buying stuff in the market. One faction's very good at manipulating stall cards. One faction's a bit more like, you know, dicking around with opponents. And, you know, when you play the game, you can just shuffle in whichever 5 factions you like and create a unique style of game in that regard. Some are more complex than others, be warned, but this is just a game with a lot of variety and very simple rules. You've only got 4 actions in the game, one of which you won't do that often anyway, so you're mainly doing 3 actions. And really, the meat of the game is more down to using the faction abilities as best as possible and the fact that they've all got sort of, you know, a decent amount of abilities for every faction. It's just a very cool deck builder, again, that separates itself from a lot of the other ones out there. Not to mention, it looks gorgeous to boot. I could just stare at that artwork all day, and then this artwork is then sort of, or at least similar to it, is replicated in stuff like Lands of Galzir and you know, the Peacemakers game that I already reviewed. And spoiler alert, those 2 aren't on my top 50, but they are still great games in themselves. But yeah, you know, this artwork has just done this designer and publisher like so well, and you know, I hope to see more games from them. You know, I'll be interested to see what their next venture is that utilizes this. Perhaps another card game. I'm down for another card game. You know, we've already had a kind of skirmish style co-op, which is pretty unique. We've had a small story-driven game. You know, again, you know, fairly unique compared to a lot of the games. And then we've got this fairly differentiated deck builder. So whatever they do, they are trying to push the envelope a little bit and be a little bit more innovative. So whatever they got planned next, I'm down for it. But for now, Day of the Merchant still remains their best work, and it's definitely worth a try. My 35 has fallen down a place from 34, no big deal. This is pretty steady, and despite this publisher's inability to release expansions within a good timely fashion, it's still a really solid game in its base game right. This is a re-implementation of a game that came out probably a good decade ago at least. You know, it's definitely at least a decade old, but you know, I never played the original. I played this new version, which is clean, streamlined, has one of the best solo modes that I've seen in the game. Very clean and very cool. This is on the Underground. This is kind of like a step up from something like Ticket to Ride, where you've got to build connections through a subway network. But the idea is that you have this lazy passenger, although I say lazy, you can use passengers that are pregnant, in a wheelchair, and elderly in this game. I don't think we would call any of those lazy, would we? But, you know, they added these in this version. Previously, those didn't exist. But the idea is that this passenger doesn't want to walk anywhere. You know, they want to use a train no matter what. Even if they've got to go next door, they'll take a train as long as it means they don't need to walk. So as you're building your networks, you're connecting them to bits on the board so that you get points for maybe set collection or just hooking up to certain bits. But what you're trying to do is put your network in such a way that when you can see on the board where they're likely to go to next, you're trying to steer the passenger to use your networks rather than other players. Points are very tight in this game. I mean, throughout the whole game, you can barely call who's going to win because it is so close. And then at the end of the game, like, someone can push away or it's neck and neck until the end. It really is close. But it's a very cool streamlined game. Doesn't take too long, but although, let's take out the elephant in the room. It doesn't take too long if you only play with up to 3 players. Yeah, the biggest Achilles heel with this game has always been that 4 players is a little bit long and a little bit chaotic, and 5 is, why the hell did 5 get put on this game? That is stupid. 5 players didn't work in the old version. It sure as hell doesn't work anymore here. But with the, with the 2 to 3 player experience, or the solo, if you buy the little On the Underground Challenge expansion, this is just a really solid route connection game. And again, it's very different from a lot of the other games. I mean, what would you compare this to? With the whole passenger steering mechanic. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. By all means, put it in the comments if you can. But this one is just really nice. It looks stark on the table with that sort of bright white board and the networks around. You've got your coloured sticks all over it to represent the route. Looks cool, whether it's the London or the Berlin map. I can't even remember if they've released the other 2. I think they have. I think Paris and New York's come out now, and they're in that box. The problem is, it took so long for them to bring out the sodding expansion, I can barely remember if it's in it or not. But, this is still just a really solid game and one to check out. But by all means, maybe cap the player count.
4 shalt thou not count, neither count thou 2, excepting that thou then proceed to 3.
Well, this next one went up a place. Apparently, yeah, this one and On the Underground literally switched places compared to last year, so they are pretty steady at this point. But certainly games from this publisher otherwise have been a little bit more on the movers and shakers front, and they keep releasing a lot of them over the course of the, at least one a year, so yeah, there's plenty to choose from. But this one is still one of their more accessible games that they've ever released. And it was the first one in what they call the West Kingdom trilogy. Yes, it is, of course, Architects of the West Kingdom. This one I still rave about as being one of the better worker placement game examples out there, because again, it's different from your basic worker placement game. The crux of the game is fairly standard. You're getting resources and you're building buildings and doing stuff to get victory points. Okay, that's normal. But you have all your 20-odd workers at the start of the game, and when you go on action spaces, the action is better depending on how many workers you've already got there. But eventually, there is a space on the board that's going to be a bit more, let's say, popular, which allows you to arrest groups of workers from other spaces. So when somebody's getting a little bit too powerful in a particular space, you can go to a spot, arrest their players, and either keep them on your board to restrict their movement, or better yet, dump them in the local prison, in order to get money. And then they've got to go fetch them themselves, and if they don't fetch them before certain round timers happen, they lose victory points for they get negatives basically for leaving them in prison. So you've got this constant thing where you're trying to do the main crux of the game of getting resources and using them to score points and build buildings and stuff, but you've also then got to mess around with the fact that your workers will start running out. You're going to have to get them out of prison every now and again while arresting other people's workers. It's a good amount of interaction, and again, something unique. Have I got to bang this drum on a regular basis here? Throw in the first expansion, which I think is a must-buy, the Artisans expansion, and you've got customizable tools for your characters, as well as a balancing aspect for having too much money in the original game. That was one flaw with it. The Artisans is pretty much a must-buy. If you enjoy Architects, you must get Artisans. The second expansion you can hold off. It does improve the solo mode, and if you're planning to play it solo, I think the expansion, I forget what it's called, the second one, it threw in a new solo mode. If you're planning to do that, then it is worth the price of admission. But if solo's not your game, you can probably skip the second expansion, because the rest of it is maybe just a bit too much. I think, Architects with Artisans is the best way to play it, and it still remains a solid worker placement that you can play with the higher count of 5-6 players without the game dragging on too much. It scales pretty well for player counts, and because turns are very sippy and quick, it doesn't take that long for it to get back round to your turn. So 5 to 6 players here actually works. Not something I want to say about most Euro games, let alone worker placements.
I don't think any of us expected him to say that.
33 down, 14 places. Yeah, this one has not had a play in a while. It's a bigger game, it's a little harder to get to the table, there's no solo mode, so it does suffer in that regard, but it's not going to be one that I'm getting rid of anytime soon, because this still remains probably my favorite, if not one of my favorite, space-themed games for getting a ship and going around exploring planets and meeting aliens and stuff like that. It is, of course, Red Raven's probably, what was it, their first game I ever played from them? The original Empires of the Void, but the second one, the second edition, is easily the better of the two. But this has, firstly, one of the best board game covers ever. The boards itself, with all the tiles on it, looks absolutely freaking gorgeous. I absolutely love it. But, I would certainly like an insert for this. Maybe I need to look on Etsy or something, because no official person, I think, has made one. But this is just a really good fun game, because it throws in, again, nice little twists on the whole spacefaring thing. It's not like, oh, I've got a bunch of guys and I go and kill you all. Yes, you can go fight NPCs and other races, but the alien races in this game, you either conquer them or you can befriend them, and there's different pros and cons to doing either or, but both will still get you points. So you can play this game in the fashion that you want. Are you going to load up your ship with a bunch of defenses and make you good at combat? Are you going to load it up with fancy tech and ways to have more flexibility with your actions, or more technology upgrades, that kind of thing? And the action sequence is quite cool, because it means that you don't feel like there's too much downtime, because the idea is that you've got 4 or 5 actions, and one active player chooses the action they're going to do, they resolve it, and then in turn order everybody else does that specific action, and then it moves on another active player, but then you get to follow the main action. So I feel like turns come around fairly quick in this, and it's not that long of a game. I mean, you can play this in a 2-hour window pretty easily once you get going. It does have a little bit of a front-loaded teach, but other than that, the rules are not that complex. I quite like the combat dice mechanic in here as well. The idea that you roll a bunch of dice and take your highest roll. So there's a bit of decent amount of mitigation with the combat. But thematically, this is just such a sound space game. I really do enjoy bringing this out. It looks gorgeous for Instagram photos. It plays well, isn't too tricky to, to play once you get going, and allows for a decent amount of variety with the different cards that you get for doing missions and pickups and deliveries and stuff, but also the layout and the different aliens that get used, because they're going to be random each game depending on player count. It's a really solid one, doesn't really get talked about much anymore. In fact, to be honest, Red Raven in general doesn't really get talked about much anymore, except for Sleeping Gods and the one that followed it. But other than that, yeah, we haven't seen much from, Red Raven lately, although give him a break. He spent, like freaking all his life doing things like Sleeping Gods and Distant Skies or whatever the new one was. The amount of work this guy puts in, the fact that he does his own art and publishing and designing and stuff like that, and even music. Yeah, the guy's multi-talented. I think he's allowed to have a rest.
The spirit is willing, but the flesh is spongy and bruised.
32, down 5 places. This is the last of the deck builders on this list. Is it the last deck builder on the entire list, though? I mean, that's technically not a deck builder. Those aren't deck builders. Those aren't deck builders. It could be. Wow, this could be. I'm just double checking. Oh, it could be. Yeah, I think this one might be the highest deck builder on the list, which is kind of surprising. I thought it would be a different one, but I don't know. I'll eat my words if it turns out to be different in the future. But this is one of the purest deck builders again out there. Again, it's like, very few extra mechanics on top of what is a solid deck builder, but this is one of the most unique ones I've ever played. It's probably the only game on my entire list, probably the only game in my entire collection that is from Queen Games, because Queen Games really do not make a lot of games that I like. Most of the time they're meh, or especially when they go down the Stefan Feld route, I just find them bad. But with this is the one game that just came out of nowhere, was barely available, came out, I tried it, I think it was on recommendation from a mate of mine who actually, helps out with Queen Games, and this is easily one of the best recommendations anybody's given me for a game, Runestones. This is really unheard of, it is underrated, but this is a really solid game. Get the first expansion for a little bit of extra variety, second expansion for a bit more variety. You don't need to use the whole plant board track or whatever, you can leave that out, but you certainly get the Runestones. But the idea with this is that the basic crux of the game, very straightforward. You deck build, you play cards, mana gets you more cards, and you collect different colored gems, and you trade these in for artifacts, which you then trade in for victory points. But here's the two little unique tricks here. Firstly, the Runestones that you acquire when you trade in the artifacts. You could trade in a bunch of a set to get a lot of victory points, or you could trade in very few for a few victory points, but every time you will still get a Runestone. The Runestone is a special ability that really powers you up, and you can have 4 of these during the game, so whether you go for more points or quicker access to Runestones is kind of a balancing act in itself. But the deck building part is really cool. You don't end up with this massive deck here, because what happens is that the game self-trashes your cards. So you play 2 cards at a time when you want to play for their abilities. You resolve both, but they're numbered. So the one that's a higher number, which is all your starter cards and then some of the more powerful ones, gets trashed out of the game after it's been played. So you end up having to acquire more cards at some point, because if you keep going without acquiring any more cards, you'll run out of cards, period. But it's perfectly feasible to play the second part of the game, with 5 cards in your deck if you're able to manipulate it well. So it's, again, unique and different, even though the main game arc in terms of collecting gems and trading them in for artifacts is very Euro, very bone dry. I mean, yeah, this is a dry game. The whole druid theme doesn't mean anything, but it looks gorgeous on the table. It's well produced. It's super easy rules. I can teach this to literally anybody. Even if you've never seen a deck builder before, I can teach you this game. It's really simple, but yeah, this one just always goes down well. Nobody comes out of this thinking, oh, that was rubbish, or even meh. A lot of people are surprised by this one because they don't recognize it at first. The concept doesn't sound amazing, but when they get into it and play it, they realize, oh, this is a cool, silky smooth deck builder. Great and different, and it's another one of those examples where you watch their brains click and then you're like, yes, got you hook, line, and sinker. But yeah, if you like deck builders and you have not tried this one, if you see me at a convention, try and get me with a copy of this game, because I will be more than glad to teach you it, and you're missing out.
Everybody got that?
Okay, for the last one on this list, all the rest of the games have been on this list before. There are new entries to this list to come, but this is the only new entry on this section of the list. And yeah, I mean, when I first played this game, and I believe I first played it when Sarah Shah from Board Games in a Minute and Drander Games, they were working together at Essen, and I hung around with them in one of the hotels, and we played a bunch of games together. One game, a trick-taking game, was introduced to me at the time, and I'd never heard of it, but I found out that it was super rare. The guy only brought like 100 copies barely to the whole convention and sold them like 10 at a time. It was kind of annoying. And I had to pay probably twice the cost of this game's value in the UK to get it from a store that was selling import games, you know. And this is very hard to get hold of. But, wow. The Kosu dice really did blow my mind with regards to it being one of the most interesting deck builders, or no, it's been that thing, you know, trick-taking games that I've said. I mean, on a recent podcast, I talked about that fishing game, which had a really unique concept. Well, this one just seems to have like a beautiful set of mechanics that work so well. You trick take with cards as normal. The cards are in numbers and suits, and you know, play a trick, you got to follow suit. So that stuff is normal. But the idea is that you have these dice. You roll all these different colored dice before the round starts, and you draft them, about 4 of them each. These dice can be played as if they were cards in your hand. So a free yellow could be a free yellow card, for example. But what happens is basically you're trying to win a certain amount of tricks, but the number of tricks you're trying to win is based on the die you have left over of the 4 that you took at the start of the round. So these different colors are going to be an interesting choice. The values of them is going to be an interesting choice, but then you've got to think like, well, hang on, if I take a bunch of high values, yes, that does mean I'm probably going to win a few tricks, but then that means I've got to finish this with like 5 or 6 tricks in front of me. That's not easy. But then, okay, let's take a bunch of low numbers. Well, they're not going to be much useful unless they're trump colors, but you know, if I can say, well, you know what, I had a bad hand, you know, it's not going too well, but now I only have to win 1 trick, so I'm good. It's just a cool little decision that's tactical, because you try to aim for it at the start of the round, but then during the round as the tricks are played, you start thinking, well, hang on, maybe it's time to play that die. Oh, I better make sure I play that die, because if I get caught out and I'm forced to play it, that means I've got to win with 6 tricks. That ain't gonna happen. You know, it's such cool little, like, really clever mechanics in this game. But on top of that, the die that's left over, again, the die that's left over is the trump color for the round and the trump number. So you basically get to set that, you know, for the round, and it will differentiate. And there's even 2 black die that you can take, which basically auto lose the trick. But when you take one of those, you're basically trying to say that my hand and dice are so bad that I will not win any tricks. So again, it's got a shoot the moon factor, which I do like shoot the moon mechanics in Trick Takers, where you try to win no tricks or all the tricks, that kind of thing. This is just so damn clever. You know, it didn't take long to be explained to me, and it took me around to get used to the whole scoring mechanism and what the importance of the dice was. But as we played the game, wow, it was like you could hear the gear turning in my head. I said that games click, and you go, ooh. This one needed a few clicks to do that with me. It's like click, ooh, click, ah, click, ooh. You know, it's like gradually getting better, getting louder. And by the end of it, I was like, I want this game now. And I couldn't get it at Essen, which made me sad. So it took me a while before I could get a copy of this game, and now I am pretty much watching this game like it's, you know, like it was my own child or something. It's like, it's my game, you terrorize it, you try and get away with it, or you break the cards, I will kill you. You know, it's kind of in that state. And certainly there is one person I know who will never be allowed to play this game with me again, because they are the sort of person who likes to take cards and go, you know, let me take some Sentinel ones here. It's like, let me just bend this in half, yeah, and then I'll play it and just bend it there so I can see it. It's like, those people should not touch card games. Hate those people, but, you know, I digress. The Kosu dice just blew my mind. Really surprising. It could even go higher, but the problem is that this one's not an easy one to get to the table. It's a longer trick-taking game than most, and not everybody's into Trick Taker, so I don't get to play this as often as I would like. But man, it is one of the cleverest trick-taking games that exists out there, and I wish it got a bigger distribution, because I think a lot of people will enjoy this.
But wait! There's more!
Right, there you go. That is another batch of the top 50. Hopefully you like these games, and by all means get the voices in the comments about whether you like these, whether you hate these, you know, or any other comments that have been made. You know, let's read and discuss appropriately. Right now, I need to get going to Board Game Club for tonight, but first, Oh yeah, I can smell my red lentil soup downstairs bubbling away. Hopefully it's not overcooked, but yep, I've got a nice dinner ahead of me. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. I hope you enjoyed it. By all means, thumb it up and consider subscribing to the channel and even the Patreon if you want to help this channel along. But mainly, as I said, get your comments down below. And remember, it's only a game, and I'll see you on the next batch of the Top 50. Take care.